Ireland is often painted in green, a land of saints, scholars, and lyrical beauty. But beneath this romantic veil lies a darker story, one carved by invasion, famine, and bloodshed. From windswept cliffs to ruined abbeys, every stone and shadow whispers of struggle. In this tale, myth and history intertwine, where banshees cry not just in legend, but in the mourning of real lives lost. This is not the Ireland of postcards, but of survival against relentless foes, both foreign and within. Here, the Vikings' axe fell upon sacred monasteries. The Norman knight raised banners of conquest, and Cromwell's army left villages smouldering. Yet, the deadliest enemy came not from sword or cannon, but from silence, a famine that hollowed the land and scattered her children across the world. To understand Ireland, we must step into its shadows, where folklore was forged in despair, and survival was an act of defiance. The journey uncovers what was hidden, exposing the sorrow that shaped resilience. This is the Ireland of banshees and ghosts, of rebels betrayed and families lost to hunger. It is a history written not only in chronicles, but in whispers, songs, and grief carried across generations. Now, we open the crypt of memory, peeling back the green to reveal the black. Foes of my folk is a story of shadow and fire, where Ireland's pain is as much a part of her identity as her poetry. Walk this path is to face the darkness and to find strength that emerged from it. In the late 8th century, Ireland awoke to a new terror. From the sea came dragon-prowed ships, carrying Norse raiders whose fury would change the island forever. Monasteries, once sanctuaries of prayer and learning, became targets of plunder. The Vikings struck with fire and steel, slaughtering monks and seizing treasures meant for God. The annals record the shock of these invasions, describing the sky darkening with sails. For the Irish, It seemed as though demons had risen from the sea, bringing with them an age of fear. Yet the Vikings were not only destroyers. They came first as raiders, but returned as settlers. They built fortresses, markets, and ports, shaping cities that endure to this day. Dublin, Limerick, Waterford. Their presence was a constant wound, but also a strange graft upon Irish soil. In legend, Viking warlords became monsters in tales told by firesides, larger-than-life figures of cruelty and greed. In truth, they merged with the Irish, becoming Norse Gaels, blurring the line between invader and native. Ireland had gained new enemies, but also new kin. Still, the memory of terror never faded. From plundered churches to villages burned, the Viking shadow lingered in story and stone. Even centuries later, the word Loch Lannis, the men from across the sea, carried chill. Ireland absorbed them, but never forgot their violence. In folklore, they are remembered as both cursed marauders and reluctant contributors to Ireland's tapestry. The sea that once brought ruin would forever be linked to their sails. In this chapter of darkness, Ireland learned that enemies could become part of the folk. Yet scars would never truly heal. In 1169, Ireland faced a new wave of conquest. Unlike the Vikings, these invaders did not vanish with the tide. They came to stay. Led by Richard Clare, known as Strongbow, the Anglo-Normans landed at the invitation of an exiled Irish king. Diarmid mac Murchada, who sought their aid to claim his throne. But their help came at a terrible price, with stone castles, armoured knights, and ruthless ambition. The Normans planted roots of foreign rule. What began as a pact soon became a yoke, tightening across the land. The Normans brought with them not only swords, but systems. They carved Ireland into manors, imposed feudal law, and built walled towns that cut across the native landscape. Castles rose like thorns, symbols of domination that loomed over valleys and rivers. For the Irish chieftains, this was a new kind of enemy, one who claimed the land itself, brick by brick. In folklore, they were seen as ironclad devils, their voices foreign, their hunger endless. Resistance flared, but the Normans were relentless, embedding their power in both stone and blood. Yet, the invaders were changed as well. Over generations, many Normans became more Irish than the Irish themselves, adopting Gaelic customs, language, and kinship ties. Still, the shadow of the conquest never lifted. Their arrival had bound Ireland's fate to England's crown, chain that would rattle for centuries. The Norman yoke was not just about battles won, but about control of the land, the law, and the very identity of Ireland. The wound cut deep, though time blurred, friend from foe, the star remained, etched into Ireland's story. The 16th and 17th centuries set Ireland ablaze, as fate became both weapon and wound. The Reformation swept Europe and Ireland. Staunchly Catholic became the field of belief. Wars of religion tore through fields and towns, pitting neighbour against neighbour. But no campaign left a mark as deep as that of Oliver Cromwell. In 1649, his armies landed with fire and fury, declaring a holy war against Irish Catholics. Drogheda and Wexford fell in blood-soaked massacres where surrender was met not with mercy, but with slaughter. For many, Cromwell became not just a man, but a curse. Cromwell's campaign was more than conquest. It was an attempt to break a people's spirit. Land was seized and redistributed to foreign settlers, while the Irish were driven west to the heartland of Connacht. To hell or to Connacht, as the phrase warned. The old Gaelic order crumbled under the weight of steel and scripture. Legends spoke of villages haunted by the cries of the slain, of waters that ran red, of curses placed on Cromwell's name that echoed for generations. Even today, his memory drags behind it the heavy chains of bitterness. Yet, amidst devastation, faith endured. Secret masses were held on hidden altars in the hills. Whispered prayers carried hope when all else was lost. The Irish clung to their religion as defiance, turning faith into rebellion and rebellion into fate. Out of the ashes of Cromwell's conquest grew a resilience that no sword could silence. The fires of faith, once meant to destroy, instead tempered Ireland's soul, forging it harder, sharper, and unyielding. The memory of massacre became fuel, and the spirit of survival burned brighter than ever. In 1845, a blight blackened the potato fields, and with it Ireland's heart. For a people already bound by poverty, the potato was not just food, but survival itself. When the crops rotted, famine took root, spreading hunger like wildfire. Families dug desperately in the earth for sustenance, only to find decay. Corpses lined the roadsides. Villages fell silent. The living grew gaunt with starvation. Yet, as Ireland starved, grain and cattle left its shores for export. Hunger was not only a curse of nature, but the cruelty of neglect. Famine was not a single tragedy, but a cascade of horrors. Coffin ships carried the desperate across the Atlantic, their decks packed with disease and death, where many never reached the New World alive. Evictions tore families from crumbling cottages, their thatched roofs burned to prevent return. Starving children begged in the streets while landlords and relief systems turned blind eyes. In Irish folklore, the famine years became known as An Gurta Mór, the Great Hunger. But hunger was too gentle a word. It was despair carved into bone, silence heavy as the grave. The famine left more than empty fields, it left empty generations. Millions died or fled, scattering the Irish across the world. Their grief married in song, story, and silence. Folklore turned the famine into a ghost, a presence that haunted every hearth, every parish, every memory. Mass graves lie unmarked in the countryside, their stones swallowed by grass, their stories whispered by the wind. The famine was Ireland's deepest wound, a shadow that endures. In its silence we hear the faint echo of the folk lost. and the resilience of those who survived. From the hills of Wexford in 1798 to the streets of Dublin in 1916, rebellion has been Ireland's eternal heartbeat. Time and again, ordinary men and women rose against impossible odds, only to be met with betrayal, execution, and loss. The United Irishmen dreamed of liberty, but were crushed in rivers of blood. Rebels became martyrs, their bodies broken, but their names sanctified in song. Ireland's soil is littered with the bones of uprisings, each failure planting the seeds of another, each defeat echoing into the next. In the Irish story, rebellion was both curse and calling. The Easter Rising of 1916 was perhaps the most haunting of all. A small band of dreamers seized Dublin, declaring a republic in the shadow of empire. For 6 days they fought while the city smouldered. When it ended, the leaders were executed, one by one, their final words carved into Irish memory. Folklore says the stones of Kilmainham Gael still weep with their blood. Defeat turned to legend and legend to inspiration. In Ireland, even the ghosts of failure breathed life into the struggle of freedom. Martyrdom became the strongest weapon of all. But rebellion was never just glory. It was famine's children taking up arms, knowing the gallows awaited. It was betrayal by neighbours, informers who sold freedom for coin. It was widows keening over executed husbands and mothers burying sons in secret graves. These rebellions were haunted not only by British rule, but by the ghosts of their own, those who gave everything, yet saw nothing won. Still, the spirit endured in Ireland. Rebellion became less an event than an inheritance, passed down like blood, burning in the marrow of the folk. Ireland's story is not one of unbroken triumph, but of wounds carried through centuries. From the dragon-prowed ships of the Vikings to the cold iron of Norman conquest, from Cromwell's slaughter to the hollow silence of famine, the Emerald Isle has known more sorrow than most lands can bear. And yet, each sorrow left not only scars, but strength. Invasion, hunger, and rebellion became threads woven into the fabric of a people who refused to vanish. Ireland's soul was hammered on an anvil of grief, and what emerged was unyielding. The ghosts of Ireland's past do not rest quietly. They walk in folklore, in song, in whispered prayers at unmarked graves. They are heard in the wail of the banshee, in the keening of mothers, in the ballads sung in exile. These shadows remind us that history is not only in books or monuments, but in memory carried from heart to heart, across oceans, through generations. The foes of the folk may have struck with steel, hunger, and betrayal, but their power faded. What endures is the story of survival. Ireland is both beauty and sorrow, myth and memory, light and shadow. To know her is to face both the poetry and the pain. The dark side of Irish history is not a tale of defeat, but of endurance, of a people who carried their grief like a torch, lighting the way forward. The foes of the folk came and went, but the folk remained, and in their survival they forged a nation that remembers not to be bound by the past, but to honour it. Ireland's story is not only in her triumphs, it is in her scars.